Hello, 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 everyone. Bonjour, everyone. Happy Friday, everyone. And today we're here in France today for our next game day flight. I hope you're all doing well here today. And our next game day flight is going to be talking about one of French football's most important rivalries, and that's the Derby du Nord today between LOSC Lille and RC Lens. We got a pretty big matchup here in French football this week. This will be the second to last stream. This will be our second to last stream here before I head out for vacation. So that's why we're here in France today. So I hope you're all having a good week. Hope your all's week is going well. I mean, it's been pretty crazy this week. It's weird not to have Two-Tone Murphy stream on those dates as well. So before we get started, I do want to say hello to everyone in chat. And all the lurkers, I hope you're all having a good morning as well. And we also have the mods here too, so I hope you're all doing well. So our flight plan should be pretty interesting. Not our game day flight, but here's our flight plan. So our flight plan is this, by the way. We'll start here at Lima Foxtrot Romeo Whiskey. We'll make our way over to Mont Saint Michel, the very historic abbey and landmark here. So we'll talk a little bit briefly about Mont Saint Michel and briefly talk about it. Then we'll fly northeast and we'll make our way to Omaha Beach, where the Americans landed on D-Day, which I visited in real life too, which is really cool. I got to visit Omaha Beach. Then the American Cemetery. We'll fly over the American Cemetery. We'll make our way further east, and we'll fly along the different beaches throughout. Which I've been to these areas too. The D-Day Museum here as well, because I visited this area. We'll then head east, and once we go that way, we make the trip over to our first stop at Lima Foxtrot Oscar Hotel at Le Havre. From there, we'll enter into downtown Le Havre. We'll fly over downtown. Then we'll fly over the Stade Ocean, which is the home of AC Le Havre, the local club here in Ligue 1. Then we're going to go further east. We'll visit the historic city of Rouen, fly over the cathedral there. Then we'll head northeast, and we'll make our way to our second stop at Amiens. I'll talk briefly about Amiens and all that. So we'll make a landing here. And then finally from Amiens, we'll make our way northeast again. We reach the city of Lens, very well-known mine city, similar to that of Pittsburgh. And then we'll enter into Lille. We'll fly over the Pierre-Mauroy Decathlon Arena, downtown Lille, and its famous cathedral, and then we'll make our stop at Lima Foxtrot Quebec Oscar. So that's going to be our flight plan for today. Should be a nice time in Lille, in northern France. Should be a pretty nice coastal flight, if you ask me. So we're taking the Cessna Caravan. I wanted to take something a little bit quicker than the normal Cessna 172, so I'm going to take something a bit quicker. So I want to take the Caravan for today. Just want something a little quicker. I'll be keeping around 150, 160 knots. There isn't too many slides to talk about today, but yes. So we're going to go ahead and talk about one last thing about this rivalry this year, of course, to talk about the upcoming matchup. We'll get started here very soon. We'll get started with the Cessna 208. Should be pretty easy to start. It's a default plane. So our max altitude is going to be 2,000 feet. So we don't really need to fly super high. But we can actually get the flight in 1,500 feet, basically. For pretty much the rest of the way, it's 1,500. So we'll just go 1,500 feet for this entire trip here in northern France. So before we get started, I do want to talk about our first waypoint. As we taxi, we're going to talk about our first waypoint here, Mont Saint Michel. Now, if you guys aren't aware about this unique tidal island and commune, this place has been around for centuries. This island is about 1 kilometer off France's northwest coast. Its population is only 29 people. But of course, this area is most famous for its famous abbey, the Mont Saint Michel Abbey, which has been around, since at least the 6th century, but maybe even beforehand. But one very interesting thing about Mont Saint Michel's Abbey is it's one of the most visited cultural sites in France. In 2010, over 1.3 million visitors visited the commune. Yes, this plane is a bit awkward to handle. But this place is very famous. It's been a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 1979 and has been a French protected monument since 1862. Of course, it's at least been around since the 9th century. It's a very old abbey. And it's got some bit of interesting history. It apparently was involved in some of the wars, mainly in the 100 Years' War. It was one of the few areas that wasn't conquered during the 100 Years' War by the English. And of course, the abbey was also well known as a prison during the ancient regime, was used as a prison. But it's a really cool landmark. And it's featured all over as pop culture, films. It was used as video games, and more. But very popular landmark. A lot of people love visiting this area, including myself. So, and we're up. Like I said, it's a STOL aircraft. The Caravan is, so it should be no difficulty. So thankfully we don't have to. So let's fly into Mount Saint Michel. Beautiful morning here. So we'll just lower the power a bit so we can get to Mount Saint Michel. Beautiful landmark here in France. So this is Mount Saint Michel. Beautiful landmark here in this part of France. So here it is. There's the abbey that sticks out of it. So this was actually one of the places that I could have visited during my trip in the United Kingdom during one of the stops in France. You could have actually visited there, but we ended up not doing that. So here it is, guys. Mont Saint Michel absolutely looks gorgeous this morning with the sun and all that. Absolutely gorgeous. We'll just think. She's looking absolutely gorgeous. We'll circle around for a bit. And then we'll go the opposite way. So, yeah. Absolutely gorgeous. Mont Saint Michel, absolutely breathtaking. We'll get a bit more of a view here. Let's go ahead and push this a little further. Let's go ahead and put this up. So we're going to fly into Normandy. So we'll make our way to the Normandy beaches, of course. We'll make our way to Omaha Beach, of course. So now that we finally made our way into the flights, we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the Derby du Nord for a bit. For this year's game, of course, this is actually a pretty big game for Ligue 1 today. And obviously, I picked this game because there wasn't really any other games this weekend I really considered. There wasn't a ton of really good games to pick. So, there wasn't any big games in the United States or Spain. And while Atletico Madrid and Barcelona were good, I've already did Atletico recently, and I'm going to say Barcelona for El Clasico. So I decided to do Lille and Lens since it's one of the bigger derbies in France. And I wanted to do something a bit differently than the ones I've already done. And before you ask, there wasn't much for baseball. But maybe in the summer there'd be a better chance to get some baseball on the schedule. So that's why I ended up doing, and of course the NBA is not in a good place right now. So I ended up deciding to do Ligue 1. And speaking of this game, of course, this is a very big one. This Friday's matchup. Lille and Lens are basically in the top 5 in the standings of Ligue 1. Of course, Lens is having an unbelievable season. They're only 1 point behind PSG, though PSG still have a game to go. But Lens are having an unbelievable season, just 1 point behind PSG. I mean, France hasn't had a new champion outside of PSG in years, of course. It's been many years since a non-PSG team wanted to win. Big game, of course. Lille are about 12 points behind Lens, but they're still comfortably in 5th place. And Lille has won 4 of their last 5 matches, so they're on a pretty good run right now for Lille. But man, Lens hoping that they can take advantage and get a win here today. So very big game, of course, this today. So big matchup. Hoping that it should be a good game, of course. Now there have been a couple other games this week, of course, in soccer that are quite important. Barcelona Atletico Madrid are a huge matchup this week. Barca and Atletico are a big game this week, of course. Um, in France, there's another big one in France was Monaco and Marseille. I almost picked that one too. But I ultimately decided to pick this one since it's already an established derby and it's a pretty intense one, as you guys can tell. So speaking about the Derby du Nord, the North Derby here in France, this rivalry is between the two big clubs of northern France, RC Lens and Lille OSC. Lens dating back to 1906 and OSC for Lille dating back to 1944 through a merger of Olympique Lyonnais and SC5s. And they're the two most successful clubs in the region, but they're both located in different departments. Lens in Pas-de-Calais and Lille in Nord. Of course, at the beginning of the 20th century, it also referred to matches between Olympique Lyonnais and US Tourcoing, as well as a couple other teams, but nowadays it's mainly these two. And these two clubs first met back in 1937 when Lille were playing under the Olympique Lyonnais emblem, and due to their close proximity to each other, only about 25 miles, and the sociological differences between the club supporters, a fierce rivalry did develop between these two. Historically, Lens is often seen as the old working-class industrial city, and Lille as a middle-class, modern, internationally oriented city. However, in recent times, the social classes opposition is not as relevant, since both now come from both lower and middle classes. But this rivalry is still a pretty important one if you know this side of France, of course. Currently, there have been 122 meetings between the two clubs, of course, with Lille taking most of the games with 48 of those 122 matches, 36 draws, and Lens took 38 games. The largest victory in the Derby was a 5-0 win, with Lille beating Lens 5-0 twice in 1950 and 1952. So pretty important matches between these two. These rivalries are quite bitter, of course, as you could tell, and they've met each other plenty of times. Some of their more memorable matches include the 1947 and 48 French Cup, which Lille beat Lens to win the French Cup, or the Coupe de France. Coupe de France is probably their most memorable match, but this rivalry is still very important, and both these clubs are quite popular in France. And both are very successful in that too. So that's a bit about the background of this rivalry. Hey, Surlidev, good to see you. I'm doing very good, Surlidev. We're here in France currently. We're doing the Derby du Nord with Lille and Lens. Yes, we're in France this time. And you know what? You know what makes me kind of sad though is that but this one's very important though. This derby means quite a bit for both sides, of course. Or Surly, no more Surly. But this rivalry is kind of important. You know, it's kind of sad though. I know a lot of people kind of look down on French football because obviously PSG have been the dominant club in French football for over the past decade and a half already. Ever since the Qataris got PSG. However, the shame is, like, people talk about PSG so much, there are so many other really historically important clubs in France to talk about. Of course, the two teams we're seeing today, Lens and Lille, have had rich histories in the French Football League. And both these clubs have won French titles, of course. Lens won it once in 1997-98, and Lille's a 4-time winner of Ligue 1, and most recently in 2020-2021. But there have been so many other clubs in France that had a long history. Of course, you have Olympique Marseille. The only other French club to win the Champions League is the 9-time Ligue 1 winners Marseille, Olympique Marseille, in southern France. You also have the fallen giant of Saint Etienne, AS Saint Etienne, having won 10 Ligue 1 titles. They were dominant in the 60s and 70s. They were the dominant French club of the 60s and 70s. The Greens, of course, who are right now in League 2. I'm trying to pronounce it right because I know Ligue 2. Ligue 2. Yeah, Ligue 2, of course. And then, of course, you also have Olympique Lyonnais. Wait, that's a 7-time champion, and they won all 7 of them in a row. And then they're playing other notable clubs. FC Nantes, 8-time champions of France. And, of course, another fallen giant, the 6-time Ligue 1 champion, Bordeaux. And Stade Reims as well. And both of those fallen giants are 6-time champions of France. But yeah, French football sadly gets really underrated. Not just from Brits look down on the French, and France has never historically done well against England. The Brits, for Britain, England and France have historically had rivalry with the French. Obviously, it makes sense considering Britain has just been a continuing extension of the historical rivalry between France and England. England and France don't like each other, and it's been that way for centuries. And the crazy thing is, you can actually blame the Normans for that. I'm probably not kidding with it. When William of Normandy, aka William the Conqueror, sailed all the way from Normandy into England, conquered England, and eventually the Normans ended up pretty much secured England. Then the Norman kings, eventually the Plantagenets, also seek the throne of France, and that's what created the 100 Years' War between England and France. Was the Plantagenets' claim to the French throne. So that's how that rivalry began in the first place. That's at least from what I know. So, but yeah. And the other reason I'd say French football gets underrated is because there have been so many amazing talents developed in France. So many players like Eden Hazard has developed in France, has developed in French academies. You obviously have clubs like Stade Rennais, for example. Stade Rennais, and they developed some very important players, like Rafinha. They developed him into the modern player that Barcelona has. Peter Cech played for Rennes before he ended up being a Chelsea legend. There are so many other ones, of course. Dembele, the defending Ballon d'Or winner, Ousmane Dembele, of course. He especially grew with Stade Rennais. They produced some amazing academy talents, and that's just Stade Rennais' academy. But French football has been a talent developing bed for years. It's just that PSG has had such a financial advantage over the other clubs, it's made it quite difficult. So, that's probably why I say French football sadly gets a bit overlooked. But despite the fact French football, I think, has rich history, some really historic clubs, and has been some excellent talent. So, that's why I'm hoping Lens actually wins the French league, because the French league needs some change besides PSG. So, we're about to reach Omaha Beach, of course. This is part of the land zone here in France. During Operation Overlord, Omaha Beach now the Allies invaded, liberated France, and it started with the Normandy landings on June 6, 1944, as part of Operation Overlord. And Omaha refers to an 5-mile section of the coast of Normandy. And this one was absolutely brutal, and mainly the people who took Omaha Beach was part of the U.S. Army had taken it, with support from the U.S. Navy and Coast Guard, and it was a very brutal. It was very brutal. There wasn't a lot of cover on the beaches. You were exposed, and there were people literally getting gunned down. And all that. And the sea, and it didn't help that the sea conditions were kind of rough, especially when you're doing the tanks. Especially be tough if you're an infantry soldier, as again, very little cover. People were getting gunned down and all that. But eventually, the Allies did break through by assaulting the bluffs, along with naval support and destruction of German defenses. The Americans ended up actually securing Omaha. Once Omaha got secured, then the rest of the forces can land and ended up spearheading what would now be the liberation of France. And about 2,400 American casualties suffered on June 6th, but at the end of the day, they landed over 34,000 troops into the troops, and as a result, it helped spearhead the liberation of Normandy. Now, I've been to this place in real life just last year, actually. I got to visit Omaha Beach and visit the Normandy American Cemetery, actually. And this was especially important for me because my mom's uncle actually was one of the casualties was actually fought in Normandy. He actually served World War II and was in the Battle of Normandy. Unfortunately, he passed away a couple days afterwards, but he's actually buried in the American Cemetery in Normandy. And I got to actually visit his cemetery. Got to visit his site. It was Thomas L. Musgrove from Alabama. He passed away June 15th, just 9 days after the Battle of Normandy. So we got to visit his grave, which meant a lot for my family. Of course, we were the first blood relatives to visit his grave, so that's why it meant a lot for me and for my family too. It just means a lot for the family, of course, to visit his grave. But yeah, the unbelievable bravery of all those men who served in World War II could not be understated. Just the bravery of these people, especially to fight. As well. And there have been some very notable people buried here. But there are plenty of other people buried here. Theodore Roosevelt Jr., the son of President Theodore Roosevelt, as well as Quinton Roosevelt, his other son. But other burials include Leslie J. McNair, Army General, one of the two highest-ranking Americans to be killed in World War II. Two of the Nealon brothers, President Robert Nealon, whose story inspired Saving Private Ryan, which was a famous movie. Two Medal of Honor recipients in Jamie W. Montliff and Frank D. Perigord were also buried here as well. So this is Omaha Beach. So this is where the Americans ended up invading. Now, of course, for you, Typhon, and probably for you, for your landing zones. So this here is Omaha Beach. The Canadians I believe the Canadians ended up actually I think Sword is where the Canadians ended up landing, if I was correct. because there were multiple beaches they ended up landing. Because at Utah Beach was Point de Hawk was the mainly oh yeah, Juno Beach was mainly about the Canadians. Was Juno. Okay. Just want to make double sure I got the right beaches and stuff. Here, of course. Just want to make sure I got the right beach for the Canadians, of course. Because I know Canadians fought very valiantly during World War II. People kind of forget the service of the Canadians, of course. So I didn't want to leave you guys behind. So let's check out the American Cemetery. So there it is, the American Cemetery. So here it is, the American Cemetery of Normandy. Here she is. Beautiful American cemetery to honor the vets who served in World War II. So we'll turn. So we'll turn around here and we'll make our way across the beach. Beaches in Normandy. So I know we're talking about sports, but I wanted to cover this because this is a very special area, and I wanted you guys to know this area very well. So I'm going to go ahead and briefly talk about RC Lawns, of course. I want to go ahead and talk about the road team, RC Lawns, or Racing Club de Lens, is based on the northern city of Lens in France. The club has its very famous nickname, La Sang et Or, translating to the blood and gold, comes from its traditional colors of red and gold, and they've been playing in Ligue 1 this season. They boast 2 national titles, the French Championship in 1998 and the 1999 Coupe de la Ligue, which was one of their honors, of course, they won, which basically is the French League Cup in 1999. Of course, they've also played in the Champions League 3 times in the Champions League. They played in the Champions League 3 times during their history, of course. They also made it to a semifinal in 1999 of the UEFA Europa League. So pretty historic club. Lens has had a long history in France's top flight. RC Lens has actually been around Ligue 1 for a pretty long time. I think Lens is one of the more played teams in France's league. In fact, Lens has played 64 seasons in the French league, making it one of the longest tenured clubs in French football in terms of seasons played, of course. Of course, the players played for professional status since 1934, with the exception of 1 year between 1969 and 1970 due to poor results and financial difficulties. And that was due to the coal mine crisis that happened in the city of Lens during that time, which prompted the shareholder company to withdraw its support. So they had to play as amateur between those years. But thankfully for Lens, they eventually got back up to being professional again. And as a result, the club continued to grow even more. So Lens definitely has a really fascinating history that I think a lot of people overlook. In terms of their home games, of course, they play at the Stade Felice Boulard de Lys is their home. It's been the home of RC Lawns since 1933. Its seating capacity is 38,000, which, here's the crazy part, it's 7,000 more than the entire population of Lens in northern France. And it was originally named after Félix Bollard, a director of Compagnie des Mines de Lens, which was anxious to promote the sport development sports clubs in the city. However, it was renamed in 2012 to become the Stade Bollard de Lille after the death of the former mayor of the city, Andres de Lille, who served as the Minister of Commerce under President François Mitterrand. This stadium has hosted many international tournaments, including the 1984 UEFA European Championship, the 1998 FIFA World Cup that was in France at the time, the 1997, 1999, and 2007 Rugby World Cup, and the 2016 UEFA European Championship. There are 4 dedicated it's English style constructed in English style, and it's mainly got 4 different stands. One named after Henry Trennan, a native of Bully-les-Mines. He was a goalkeeper at the club for 18 years. Then he became the sports director for Lens from 1952 to 1956, named after one of the club's most notable figures. Then you have Tony Morinck, dedicated to him, former player coach, international in the 50s. And then you have one named Elie Delacourt, a former fans group president, and finally Max Lepagnat, which is the former president of the district of Artois. So these were some of the most notable people the stands were named after. But pretty cool stadium. Very passionate. Lawns are definitely a pretty cool. Hey, Planet Neutral, good to see you, my dude. I hope you're doing well. We're in northern France. We're doing one of French football's most passionate rivalries, the Derby du Nord. Definitely one of the region's biggest rivalries, of course, in France. Like I said, people overlook France a lot, but French football definitely has passion. I actually have a video in my Discord. It's under announced stream schedule. It has a video of what a derby looks like. But this derby is one of the best ones in France. Oh, you got to watch Vancouver, BC, the BC place. Oh, cool. Well, I got tickets to see Louisville City in May, so I can't wait to watch Louisville City play. I can't wait for Lucy to come back, of course. I'll be watching them pretty soon at the Lynn Family Stadium. So I'm looking forward to that, of course. Once I head back for vacation, of course. But yeah, very cool to get to be Vancouver. Yeah, Lucy's been pretty good. Yeah, Lucy's been absolutely incredible this season. Unbeaten throughout all of our matches, and absolutely took care of the last cup game against Lexington. I mean, we're 4-0 in the championship this year in the East. I mean, we've been the only team that hasn't suffered a draw or loss in our loss. Just 4-0, baby. Oh, it's been great. But yeah, very excited for all that when that comes. So we're gonna fly to Le Havre for a bit. So another slide we're gonna be covering in the last slide we're gonna cover for now, of course, before we get to Le Havre. Has been Lens' club identity. Now, for several years, Lens have sported a red and yellow kit. However, during its earlier years, they actually were not the same, and they originally chose green and black to be their jerseys. As green to recall the place Verte, and black for the coal mines. Of course, that wasn't going to last forever because Lons eventually changed its colors in 1923 to become the red and gold that we know RC Lons today, following the appointment of Pierre Moglia as president. Legend has it that Moglia chose these colors as a reference to the Spanish flag. Indeed, it was while passing by the ruins of the Church of St. Leger. It was one of the last vestiges of Spanish rule in this part of France. Of course, another color legend also claims that these colors came from the coal mines, red for the blood of the miners and gold for the coal, which was precious at the time. And of course, it's been Lons' team colors ever since. The red and gold makes it one of the most recognizable clubs in the country for its colors. That being said, of course, the black and green are used for other uniforms, of course. Mainly the road ones have mainly did the green and black. Now, in terms of crest and the logos, of course, the current logo, of course, featured the blood and gold with a miner's lamp and a castle surrounded by two fleur-de-lis, which are the arms of the city of Lons. So you can see in their crest, which is pretty cool. Pretty cool crest. Like I said, the red and gold just makes it really striking. Beautiful, beautiful kits. Definitely some of my favorites in France. Absolutely gorgeous, of course. So we're about to enter our first stop at the city of Le Havre. Is where we're going to be having our first stop. Le Havre. This city here in France is, of course, the busiest port in the French North Coast, and the largest containment port in France, as well as the second largest city in Normandy. It also has, in addition, this port was founded back in 1517 by King Francis I, and of course, development was initially hampered by the religious wars, conflicts with England, epidemics, and storm. However, it was from the end of the 18th century that Le Havre finally began to grow, and the port took off with slave trade than other international trade. This area was bombed quite a bit in World War II, but eventually rebuilt the entire city. Of course, Le Havre is also known for other sectors, mainly service sectors, and new industries, with aeronautics and wind turbines became a big part of the city. And UNESCO has even made this a World Heritage Site, actually. Its central city is actually a UNESCO World Heritage Site due to its unique post-World War II reconstruction and architecture. So, pretty cool city. Le Havre is actually a very neat one. My sister actually got to explore the city while we were doing Normandy. My sister and her husband ended up exploring Le Havre's downtown, which was pretty cool. Le Havre has such a neat downtown and such. Really cool city, of course. Really neat place. Of course, for culture, Le Havre has some really cool neat events and cultural stuff. The oldest building is its abbey that's still surviving from the medieval days. And one of those rare heritage is the Le Havre Cathedral, which is also surviving, and it was laid back in 1536, and it's still there as well. Of course, in terms of sports as well, Le Havre has some of the oldest sports clubs in all of France, actually. Most notably, its famous football club, Le Havre AC, which dates all the way back to 1894, making it one of the oldest football clubs in France. The Sky Navy, of course. Pretty important city, of course, and they produce some really interesting players throughout their history as well. And they produce a lot of youth players throughout their history, of course. Le Havre had produced players like Paul Pogba, Charles Nizagba, and Matthias Lepellier. as well as many other players too. Benjamin Mendy, Riyad Mahrez, and more. Were all developed in Le Havre's academies. So pretty cool stuff. Pretty neat football club here in France, in Le Havre. So we'll be making our landing here at Lima Foxtrot Oscar Hotel at Octaville Airport. That is where we're going to be landing. And it's mainly the main airport of the city, of course. So we'll make a landing here pretty soon. Yeah, here's the route, Surly. Here's the route. So of course we do have one more stream here in this community for a while, and that would be on Sunday to visit Kings Canyon National Park, the other half of the complex of Sequoia Kings Canyon Complex. So we'll check out Kings Canyon on Sunday. Looking forward to that with the rest of you guys, of course. Exploring the rest of that national park complex. Looking forward to that with you guys. So looking forward to that. Sharing that with all you guys, of course. So here we go. We'll make our landing. Yeah, I don't like that this thing has a D10s. Most of the aircraft don't have it in this end, but this one does. So we'll just park right here. If you anyone guys want to join on in, we're on Southeast Asian server. And we'll be here pretty soon as well. So pretty cool stuff. So we'll get ready to get going pretty soon, of course, for the next leg. So we'll get ready to get departed pretty soon. We're going to go ahead and get ready for the next leg as we depart. Here is downtown Le Havre. So here we go. So here is downtown. Pretty cool. It's an area I've been to in real life. Of course, I will be heading back there again because we're going to be in the Mediterranean next week. At this point, Friday we'll be in England, in Southampton. When we get ready for the trip to the Mediterranean, which will last 14 days in the Mediterranean. So, 1,500 feet. That is Le Havre. There's the cathedral. And to our left is the Stade d'Ocean, the home of Le Havre. There's Le Havre's home ground. So we're going to visit Rouen soon. Before we, I'm going to go ahead and reduce the power a little bit. Slow us down just we don't want to go too quickly. So our next slide will be covering the support for the club. RC Lens is actually a very well supported club here in France. Its highest ever league average attendance was in 2000-2001 with 39,000 people, where the club finished 14th in the league. A record attendance was set back in 1992 in front of 48,000 spectators, of course. But the supporters of Lens are often described to be some of the best supporters in all of France, supporting the club through thick and thin. In the 70s, friends and Lens were known for their kindness, in contrast to a lot of the British fans at the time, who were labeled hooligans, and they're praised for their warmth, fervor, and enthusiasm. So they're one of the top fans in France for decades, have been some of the best fans in the country. And many of the RCL supporters of Racing Club Lens come from the Norte-Pas-de-Calais regions, including Calais, Boulogne, and Arras, who not hesitate to make the trip. Of course, the Supporters Club for Lens was in 1926, and they still have supporters sections to this day. Of course, Lens are also quite a popular club in France, even though they're behind PSG, Lyon, and Marseille for popularity. In 2003, a panel by Ipsos answered that Racing Lens as their favorite club, which is 3% of the country's population, which is actually 5th in the club rankings. In 2008, it became ranked 6th among the French public's favorite top 5 clubs. So yes, Lens are actually quite popular in France. So they're actually quite a popular club for supporters. So very important stuff here for RC Lens. Like they're a pretty important club in French football. Even if they're not nearly as big as some of the other clubs, their support makes them very, very different from many other fans in the country. Now, here's their club honors. They've won Ligue 1 once in 1997-98 season, but they have been runners-up 5 different times, most recently in 2022-2023. They've won Ligue 2, the Ligue 2 title, 4 times. They have never won the Coupe de France. They've been runner-up 3 times. Nearly got the double. They did win the Coupe de la Ligue in 1998-99. And of course, they were semifinals for the UEFA Cup. They've also won a couple of other minor trophies here too. So in terms of notable players for Lens, so here's some of the names mentioned for RC Lens. You have Eric Sikora, Ahmed Ujami, Guillaume Wormus, John Guy Walliman, Roger Bully, Rafael Varane, Seko Fofana, Vittorino Hilton, and many more are some of the other legends that have played for Lens, of course. Are some of their most famous players that have played for the club. So, pretty notable names, of course. So, pretty important club here at RC Lens, the red and gold. So, we're going to enter into the city of Rouen for a bit. And then once we go through Rouen, we'll talk a little bit about LOSC Lens, of course. We'll talk about Lille, of course. We'll talk about Lille next. But the city of Rouen is actually one of the was once one of the most largest and prosperous cities in medieval Europe. Its population of its metro area is around 712,000 people. It was the seat of the Exchequer of Normandy during the Middle Ages, and it was one of the capitals of the Anglo-Norman and Angevin dynasties that ruled both England and France from the 11th to 15th centuries. And from the 13th century onwards, the city experienced a remarkable economic boom thanks to the development of textile industry, factories, and river trade. And this was also the city where Joan of Arc was tried and burned alive in May 30th, 1431. Of course, it was severely bombed by the bombing in 1944, though it regained much of its dynamism in the post-war period. Very historic city. Some of the main sites here. However, the most famous site is its famous cathedral with its butter tower. And it was mainly completed, its facade was completed in the 16th century. And it's been built and rebuilt over 800 years. And at one point, it was actually the tallest building in the world from 1876 to 1880. This was actually once the tallest building in the world. Yes, this place was. And it was first consecrated back in 1063. It's amazing that this place still even survived the bombings of World War II. But it's absolutely gorgeous, though. The cathedral is absolutely stunning. Look at all the pictures for it. It's really stunning. But there are other structures here in the other landmarks. You have the Grosse Horloge, the astrological clock that dates back to the 14th century. And then you have other structures, the ruined castle, which keep was known as where Joan of Arc was brought to be threatened with torture. You have the Palais de Justice, the Church of St. Owen, the Gothic Church of St. Maclo, and many more landmarks are found in the city. But really cool area, rich culture heritage here. A very underrated city, of course. Oh, you're 57 kilometers behind you. Oh, I see you, Sir Dev. You're way, way back there. It's hard to see your name tag because of the sun, of course. The sun's blinding. It's in my eyes. Oh, and speaking about other things today for sports, of course. Um, you know what? You guys won't believe this, of course. In England, of course, one of the was Millwall. Yes, was the EFL Championship standings. And apparently Millwall is now second in the table. Yes, bleeping Millwall is second in the table. They've only played 2 seasons of top flight football, and this could potentially be their first ever time in the Premier League. Oh, Millwall. Can't believe that could actually happen. That would be crazy to see Millwall in the Premier League. Never thought that would happen. And now Wrexham are on the table at 6. So pretty big stuff, of course. Of course, for Everton, the Toffees, the one I watched, of course, in England. They'll be playing Sunday. They won't be playing at all this week. In fact, the Toffees won't be playing again until April 11th. So no Everton this weekend, of course, for the Toffees. But yeah, who knows? Maybe Everton could pull off another big win at Brentford. Be huge if that were to happen. So here is the city of Rouen. We should be getting to the cathedral pretty soon. So this is the city of Rouen. So the cathedral should be sighted here pretty shortly. You should see his very famous cathedral from above. Like, the cathedral should not be a hard place to spot. There she is. There's the cathedral. Sticks out like a sore thumb. There she is. That cathedral right there sticks out pretty sorely. So there is the Rouen Cathedral. So let's go ahead and talk about the second club we're going to be talking about here today. So let's go ahead and talk about our next club, LOSC Lille. The LOSC Lille, or LOSC, which stands for Lille Olympic Sporting Club. This club, by the way, the Mastiffs, they're also nicknamed the Mastiffs, of course, was formed from the merger of two of its sporting clubs, Olympic Lyonnais and Sporting Club Faivois, located in two different districts of Lille, merged after World War II. And both these clubs were actually the founding members of French Division 1, and in fact, they were the inaugural champions of Ligue 1. And their most successful period was, of course, from 1946 to 1956, was their most successful in the decade, as they won 2 French League titles and 5 French Cups within 10 years. Of course, the club itself has had through many hardships, of course, and nowadays it mainly qualifies in European competitions pretty much ever since the 2010s. And once even achieved the league and cup double in 2010-2011, of course. They've won, in total, they won 4 league titles, 6 French Cups, and a Trophy d'X champion since its foundation. And of course, have participated in the Champions League 9 times, as well as getting through the knockout phase 3 different times, as well as making it to the UEFA Conference League quarterfinals once as well. And of course, their nickname is the Mastiffs, is their nickname. And they're known for their iconic academy, producing many trained graduates throughout its history. And are one of the most popular clubs in France, too. Very popular one as well. In terms of its stadium, of course, they play in the Stade Pierre Mauroy is going to be their stadium, of course, is their home ground. The Stade Pierre Mauroy is their home ground since 2012. It has a seating capacity of 50,000 people, making it the 4th largest sports stadium in the country. The only ones that are bigger than this place is the Stade de France in Paris, in Saint Denis, home of the French national team. The Stade Velodrome in Marseille, which can now host 67,000 people. And Parc Olympique Lyonnais, home of course, Olympique Lyonnais, that has 59,000 people. In fact, this stadium is even bigger than PSG's home ground. Now, of course, this home ground was initially named Grand Stade Lille Métropole. However, it was renamed in 2013 after the death of the former mayor of Lille and Prime Minister of France, Pierre Mauroy. It also hosted the UEFA Euro 2016 and 2023 Rugby World Cup, as well as other events like Eurobasket 2015 and the 2024 Summer Olympics basketball tournaments were held in this building. But very cool stadium, though. It's got a retractable roof and everything. A very modern stadium, especially in France. Really neat ground, of course. So pretty neat and very historic stadium. Of course, pretty neat stadium. Of course, it replaced their older ground at the Stade Gréminois Juris, which was only 21,000, of course. A pretty cool stadium and stuff too. One of the bigger things about Lille, of course, is its club identity. Because it was born from the merger of two different clubs, and Lille logically adopted the main elements of the kits from those two clubs. The first home jerseys were primarily white with red scapular, thus encoding the colors of Olympic Lille and the scapular of the SC5s. And the blue of the 5s was also found in the shorts and socks worn by the players, and it remained that way for decades. However, things have changed once Nike came around in 1999. They reversed the main colors and now play prominently red at home with a predominantly white jersey. Of course, for 2016-17, Lille went to the traditional white home kit to celebrate its 70th anniversary. In terms of the logos, of course, it's changed multiple times. When the players' jerseys directly display the coat of arms of the city was found in 1944, and its first logo appeared in 1946. Based, of course, the fleur-de-lis, which was blazing gules with a fleur-de-lis argent. And that coat of arms dates back to 1199. Of course, one very interesting thing, of course, was that in the 70s, of course, and 80s, they adopted a new logo based on the team's nickname, the Mastiff. Of course, that nickname's actually been around since the 20s, and stemmed from a journalist's comment saying the tenacity of the Lille players remind them of a Mastiff. And of course, the Mastiff became more prominent of a logo ever since the 80s. And of course, the Mar logo you see here today, since 2018, was its pentagonal shape, which references the city's famous citadel, and the massive fleur-de-lis are also present in the identity. But yeah, pretty unique logos and identities and colors here in Lille. Parts of it too. So pretty cool club identity and stuff as well. So, in terms of support, the first supporters of this were first founded back in 1912. It was with the two largest of these are called the Hardes de las Dogs and Alles Lille, and together boasted over 2,000 members. During its golden age in the 50s, thousands of supporters traveled to Paris, crowding the Gare du Nord, which was the train station, to attend the numerous Coupe de France finals that were played at the Stade de Columbus at the time. Of course, when the club declined, the fervor waned, and although core group supporters always managed to fill the stadium, however, thankfully Lille returned back to more audience in the 2000s. And it's continued to grow ever since. Of course, Lille has some pretty big rivalries. Of course, its rivalry with Lens is their biggest one. Of course, Lille is also a very popular club, even though it doesn't threaten the big ones. 3 people in 2006 in France say that it's one of the most popular clubs in France. 3 years later, of course, Lille is ranked around the 6th most popular club in France in 2010. And like I said, Lille is quite popular, and its similar in support is very similar in support to that of its rival Lens. So again, it shows that these two are quite popular, even if they are not the biggest clubs in the country, but they're very historic for a reason. In terms of their club honors, of course, Lille has won 4 Ligue 1 titles in 1945, and of course their golden age in 1953-54. Then, of course, their 2 most ones in 2010 and 2011, and the 2020-21 season. But they've been runners-up 6 different times, of course, throughout the 40s and 50s. They came very close 3 times in the 40s and 50s. It actually came close 4 times during the late mid-40s to early 50s. They won the French division 4 times, second division 4 times. And in terms of cups, they're one of the most successful ones winning the Coupe de France. They've won 6 of them, most recently in 2010, 2011 as part of their double, and the French Super Cup in 2021. So, pretty historic club, pretty successful track record, of course. And finally, as one of the most notable clubs in France, Lille has produced some iconic club icons. But the most famous club icon from Lille's academy, and one of their most famous notable players, of course, is of course a guy named Eden Hazard. Now, of course, any of you Chelsea or Real Madrid fans probably know Eden Hazard for his time at Chelsea. However, he began his career at Lille, actually, and developed through the Lille Academy. It made over 190 appearances at Lille. He even became the first non-French player to win the Ligue 1 Young Player of the Year, and was crucial for getting Lille's league double. And as a result, he became the youngest player to ever win the Ligue 1 Player of the Year. Of course, after making over 109 appearances, Hazard then signed at Chelsea, and that's where his legend grew even further at Chelsea. Was a big part of Chelsea's success with the Premier League, Football League Cup, the FA Cup, and more. However, unfortunately for Hazard, he did not turn up well at Real Madrid, but he's without question the most notable player to ever play at Lille. And he's been a Lille icon at Lille. So, some of the other notable players include Marcel Sommerlinck, Jean Borat, Rio Mavuba, of course, one of the best Canadian players, Jonathan David. He had the most extensive transfer of any Lille player, was Jonathan David. And that was before in fact, he played at Lille just recently, up to 2025, over 170 appearances at Lille, but then he moved to play for Juventus. And Mike Magnan are some of the most famous players of Lille. So that's kind of been our last slide for today. But yeah, not really much to go for. Of course, there wasn't tons of knowledge and information. But there is some pretty historic stuff I do want to talk about these clubs. So yeah, I hope we're high enough to not hit the wind farms here in this part of France, of course. So we'll be very close to hitting our next stop at Amiens. Will be our next stop. So we'll get here pretty soon. We're just about 80 nautical miles from our last stop. So we're about pretty close. So let's see. Surdev is actually ahead of us in the Cessna 208 Medic. Yeah, look at all the wind farms. So we'll get closer to Amiens pretty soon. Mm-hmm. So we're going to be heading to Amiens. This city historically is a very important historical city here in France. Its population is around 136,000 inhabitants. The capital of the Somme department. In the central landmark in the city is the Amiens Cathedral, the largest Gothic cathedral in the country. It's also home to the largest university hospital in France. It has 1,200 beds. And there are two very famous people that lived here. The author Jules Verne lived here from 1871 until his death in 1905. And it's also the birthplace of the current French president, Emmanuel Macron. And Amiens was heavily fought over for both world wars. It suffered significant damage and occupied by both sides. Most notably, Amiens was the site of the 1918 Battle of Amiens, with the opening phase of the 100 Days Offensive, which ended up led to the armistice of Germany to end World War I. And then, of course, the bomb was bombed quite a bit during World War II, but the city was rebuilt. But this city is still very important for cultural heritage, with significant amount of tourism based for historical landmarks. Really cool place. Amiens is a really neat city, of course. There's lots of landmarks. The cathedral is its most famous landmark. It's absolutely huge. It's one of the largest cathedrals in the world by interior volume, dating back to the 13th century as well. So we should see the Amiens Cathedral very soon, of course. Absolutely beautiful place. It's absolutely enormous. So, like I said, I love flying around France. It's pretty neat. That being said, it's not the Alps nor the French Riviera, but northern France is fine enough for today. And then we'll get to Lens and Lille pretty soon. So yeah, and ahead of us is the cathedral. That's not hard to miss. The cathedral is not hard to miss at all. It's very visible. It's taller than basically everything else in the city. But yeah, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site as well. It was designated as one in 1981. So pretty neat place. So we'll slow down for a bit. We'll slow down for a bit. Then we'll make our way east. Now, of course, for Flight Sim, you guys all probably heard the news about it. The TriStar came out. The TriStar got released this weekend on MSFS Official. So pretty big news, of course. The TriStar got released. That is a very interesting plane. It was definitely ahead of its time. But it was also the death of It was also the last major commercial aircraft released by Lockheed for commercial operations. Then it shifted over to military aviation not far afterwards. So here is the Amiens Cathedral. Beautiful city. Of course, the cathedral is massive. So here's the cathedral. Absolutely huge. Absolutely massive cathedral. It's huge. The largest cathedral I've ever went to in real life is the one in Liverpool. The Liverpool Cathedral. Absolutely massive cathedral in Liverpool. So we're going to go ahead and turn off our autopilot. And our airport is straight ahead of us. In fact, it will be straight ahead. Right here. will be our next stop. But there is also one more interesting news, of course. Yes, the A2A stuff is real. It is not April Fool's joke. The A2A stuff is all real. The RG550 is going to be Legacy RG550. The Lancair Legacy, that's going to be a very interesting plane. The Lancair, that should be a very fun aircraft. But of course, the big one I think everyone wants is a Q4 at the end of the year. The A2A plane I think everyone's been wanting, their Cessna 172. The thing that made A2A what it is their 172. Now that I would definitely be interested. Okay, that was a rough landing. Never do that again. Real life, I'd be dead. But of course, this is why I turned damage off. So we'll just park here. Do not mind the damage I hit. Yeah, this is what I don't like about the Cessna 208 in this version. Not very good. So we'll take a break here for just a little bit. But yeah, the 172 is the big one. So that is the one people wanted to do as well. So looking forward to a lot of the new stuff in Flight Sim, but that's definitely very, very big though. But yeah, that TriStar is also very interesting. Very unique aircraft. I've seen some people flying it. Very unique plane. Of course, the Kodiak has also returned as well. I might have to get the Kodiak again. From Simworks Studios, I might have to try and get the Kodiak again. Because, yeah, the Kodiak was such a good add-on for many years. So, I might have to get that again. So I see there's Surly. So we'll get back into the air very quickly, of course. And we got one last leg left to go. So I'm going to go ahead and add some more fuel back into the plane. We only got... So let's load it back in. And we're going to go ahead and take on off. So we're going to stay to 1,500 feet, and we're going to 24 degrees. So we're going to go ahead and take off. Like I said, the Cessna 208 does not need much of a takeoff. Does not need much room to take off. It is a STOL aircraft. STOL aircraft do what STOL aircraft do. So, all right, guys, we're gonna head over to Lille, to Lons in Lille. So we'll be doing that pretty soon. So so for the future of the streams, of course, when we get back on from vacation, Wednesday will be our general aviation stream. We'll be doing our variety stream on Wednesday, of course. I'm still doing the game day flights in the weekends, of course. But I'm going to do more variety stuff on the Wednesday stuff at 10 a.m. my time, which would be 1500 Zulu, your guys' time. Will be, P.S. I'm going to be streaming earlier in the day because, well, if I stream earlier in the day, I don't have to worry about all that stuff. So we're going to be heading into lawns first. So before we get to lawns, I do want to show you what the club websites are kind of like. So we'll be doing we're going to do RC lawns for a bit since we're going to be entering there first. So of course this is mainly in French, obviously. So yeah, all this stuff is in French, by the way. So the entire thing is in French. So thankfully I have a bit of translator already. So you can, so they got information about the club, the 120 years in history, of course. Power of Google Translate. Yeah, you can learn about the 120-year, it's Lawns' 120th anniversary of RC Lawns. But yeah, the club has rich history, so you can go back to their 1997 year where they won the championship. And I do think France is also one of the favorites of the World Cup this year. And speaking of the World Cup, there's been some pretty big things. 2026 is definitely interesting for the Cup, of course, but there have been some very big ones, obviously, for the Cup qualification. So the big one, though, is that Italy has failed to qualify for the World Cup for the third straight World Cup. Italy has failed to qualify. Yes, the Italians lost to Bosnia and Herzegovina. Yep, Italy had lost again. They lost on penalties to Bosnia, which is absolutely humiliating for the Italians. What a brutal, brutal way for Italy to lose another World Cup, and it's caused a massive controversy for Italian football because it turned out everyone is stepping down. The Italian soccer president has stepped down. The soccer delegation chief Buffon has resigned. The federation's clean house now. Because Italy has been absolutely humbled again. Yeah, the poor Italians, they simply can't win. Of course. The poor Italians, they couldn't do it. Sweden beats Poland, so no more Lewandowski. The Swedes have made it to the World Cup. Turkey beats Kosovo in Europe, and finally in Europe, the Czechs have qualified for the World Cup. And then the Interconfederation playoffs sees the Dominican Republic of the Congo make it the World Cup, beating Jamaica 1-0, and then, of course, Iraq beats Bolivia to advance to Iraq in the World Cup. So yeah, that's basically all 48 teams at the club at the World Cup, which is going to be pretty crazy. And the Americans are now in Group D, which is not actually that bad, of course. It's not that bad of a draw. I know Turkey is going to be pretty good. Australia is going to be pretty solid, but not that impossible to win the table. Just won't be easy, though. So maybe the Americans finally do well in the World Cup, of course. Yeah, there's their history at the time they won the league championship. They also have their there's also their supporters as well. Then, of course, their home stadium. And, of course, there's their shop, of course. So, of course, there's their famous red and yellow jersey, red and gold. So, there's their famous red and gold jerseys that pretty cool stuff. And of course, lawns have also wore and of course there's their red and gold scarf. Now, pretty cool stuff. Yeah, pretty cool colors here. So that is RC Lawns. And then there is and here is Lille's website for Lille, of course. And yes, they also have an English site, unlike the French. So they have the English site. There's their menus. So you got all the different teams. They got their history, their honors. So there's their history, of course. All very different history, of course. Their rise of the club in the 2000s, 2010s, their old history. And here's their store, too. There's their custom jersey and stuff. So there's their uniforms, of course. And here's their scarves and stuff too. But yeah, that is all we need to know about Lille, of course. So that is it. So now we have to talk about their cities, of course, they play out of. So let's talk about these cities then. Let's start with Lens in France. So Lens in the city of Pas-de-Calais, it was one of the main towns of the Hauts-de-France department. this city has been around since 1180 as part of the Count of Flanders. Then it received a charter from King Louis VIII of France in the 13th century. However, Lens, then, of course, in 1849, a big moment happened when coal was discovered after surveys happened, and it led to an expansion of the city as an important industrial center at the mining basin, and experienced large amount of profits from the Lens Mine Company. Of course, the city was largely destroyed in the First World War, and the population of 18,000 fell by half. And again, it was bombed even more during World War II. Of course, then coal mine did decline, with the last coal mine closing in 1986, but the mine basin was made a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2012. So this city was a big part of the mining community here in France. Pretty cool, pretty neat mining town, of course. We'll be checking it out, and we'll mainly be visiting the stadium here. So, we're right at Lens. So we should see the Stade Boulevard Stadium ahead of us. So we'll head over from Lens to Lille. And yeah, these cities are basically right next to each other. So this is Lens. Now to our left, you see that heap thing there to our left? Well, that is actually a spools heap. And it's because that is a remnants from the coal mine days. I mean, this area was mined significantly for coal. So this is the mine community of Lens. Back when coal mine used to be a very big deal in this part of France. So, there's that. Unfortunately, it's not modeled, but maybe Lille will find the stadium, of course. So now our next stop is Lille, and this is our last city stop. Is right next to Lens is Lille. Population 238,000 people, but its metro area is around 1.5 million people, which is the fourth most populated metro area in France. Lille has been nicknamed in France the capital of Flanders. This city has had a rich history from the Middle Ages to the French Revolution, and it was besieged a lot during its history, successfully belonging to different states: the Kingdom of France, the Burgundian state, the Holy Roman Empire of Germany, and the Spanish Netherlands. Of course, this area became besieged again during the Franco-Austrian War of the French Napoleonic era, and of course and then the two world wars severely damaged a lot of the areas and stuff. But Lille became very well known for the Hotel de Ville, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, the belfry around it. But of course, there's other really important sites, including the birthplace of Charles de Gaulle, which, by the way, if you guys know about him, he's probably the most famous person from France. He's France's most famous person out of Lille is him. Charles de Gaulle was born there, and he was the general resistance fighter and president of France. He's their most famous individual. The Cathedral of Lille is also famous, and that was built between 1667 to 1670. And the Lille Cathedral are some of the most famous landmarks in the city. So, So we'll be visiting Lille a little bit. But that's a little bit about Lille. So we're going to go ahead and make our way to Lille, fly over the stadium, fly over downtown, and then we'll stop at our final stop.
Someone was detected at your front door.
So sorry about that. Whoops. Well, that brings us here as well. So this is Lille. So we see the stadium here. The Pierre Mauroy Stadium's in front of us, and there is downtown Lille. We should fly over the Citadel, and then we'll make our stop here at Lima Foxtrot Quebec Oscar. So we should be made there very soon. Following courts of twin cities, of course, Lille, some of its twin cities include Liège, Belgium, Leeds, England, in the United Kingdom, Cologne, Germany, Buffalo, New York, in the United States, and Wrocław in Poland. So we're going to go ahead and slow down the aircraft. We're going to finally slow her down into Lille. So. Yeah, beautiful city here in Lille. It also covers Roubaix, Tourcoing are also part of the metro area here in Lille. So yeah, there's the home stadium of Lille. And there is Lille. Sorry about I have to pause. So this should be a pretty quick flight. Like I think the stream went pretty quickly, but there wasn't too much stuff I do want to talk about, and I wanted to cover this pretty quickly. So yeah, we're about to enter into downtown Lille. Let's see, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So here is the Lille here's the cathedral down below us. But of course, there is the citadel, and this is the citadel here in Lille. Pretty impressive. So we're going to go ahead and turn right. Here you go. And we'll stop right here. Beautiful landing spot here. Perfect. So we'll stop here, and we'll turn off the engine and everything. So that's it, everyone. Welcome to Lille. I hope you guys enjoyed this flight as much as I did. Beautiful airport here. I hope you guys enjoyed this flight. So we'll be back on Sunday at Sequoia National Park. We'll be exploring Kings Canyon. We're going to be back in Fresno and all that. So I'm be very excited though to explore the rest of Kings Canyon. So we'll be back then. So we'll find someone to raid and see you guys on Sunday. Take care, everyone, and see you all soon. Goodbye, everyone.